I'm Alex Savidge from KTVU Fox 2 News here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And to talk about some of the latest news surrounding the coronavirus outbreak, we're joined by Dr. Vanila Singh, clinical professor at Stanford School of Medicine and former chief medical officer with the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Singh, good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you, Alex.
All right, let's talk about what we have seen play out all across the country this week. We had a couple of states, Mississippi and Texas, essentially deciding that they were going to do away with their mask mandates for people in those states. And the governor of Texas proudly declaring that he wanted all businesses to reopen 100% capacity. Does this seem like a smart move given where we are right now with cases?
Well, look, I mean, if I were running things, I think number one, I do applaud the reopening aspect. I think there are a lot of people who are in desperate measures. And the data, for example, for indoor restaurants wasn't as severe as people said when finally the restaurant associations like here in California were able to get the data released. So we have to keep it scientific, even when it seems like maybe it's too soon. I also think at a time when we have more vaccinations on the go, the third vaccine approved with emergency use authorization, we're certainly in a much better spot than we were a year ago. In that we have three vaccines.
For example, the test positivity rate was actually higher, is actually higher right now than it was in October when the initial COVID restrictions were put in place. How do you square that?
Yeah. So here's the thing. That means that more people have who are either symptomatic or know that they were exposed are seeking the testing. And it also probably means that many of those could not be screening tests. Like there's a lot of ways to look at it, that it's much more targeted, that the right people are getting tested when they need to, and it's coming up positive. We're also coming off the very highs of the January surge, which were very concerning. But remember, our vaccinations only started at the end of 2020. And yet it has been accelerating as we've gotten better at it. And we have a third one now. So I think that's important. Why? It's important because we have increased immunity in our population, both from the vaccine and from natural infection. People who are getting the virus but are still developing the immunity are similar to the vaccinated people. So I think that's one important thing. The other thing is that a lot of folks do feel in the businesses and the school realm that reopening should happen because there are a lot of states that are doing it and the rates aren't what we would expect them to be, meaning there's a lot of other factors at play.
Yeah, I think for a lot of medical experts, especially, it feels like that's a lot to do all in one shot. That's all. I mean, for you, if let's say you lived in Texas right now, would you feel comfortable taking your family out to a packed restaurant, 100% capacity, open, nobody wearing masks inside that restaurant? Would you feel comfortable and safe?
So I think that answer has to be only by the circumstances that you are. Let's say you're vaccinated, then you're going to feel a heck of a lot more comfortable than someone who
isn't. In that group is going to, in that restaurant, we can be assured is vaccinated. So,
no, but you can be assured if you're vaccinated. Okay. So what I'm saying
only if you're vaccinated.
If I know I'm vaccinated, my answer is going to be very different than if I'm not. And it'll be different if I'm in the vulnerable category and I'm not. So it varies on who you are and what risk you're able to take. I think people are informed. Now, would I have done this measure? I think what the governor of Connecticut is doing is a little bit closer to what I would do, which is they're striving to reopen businesses as well, but they are keeping the state mandate for mask use there. But I do want to go back to Texas. I did go and
actually, I mean, allowing more people inside businesses does make sense. Doing away and not mandating masks, which are the one tool that you've continued to talk about, and all the experts have continued to say this is the key tool to preventing the spread of the virus, to tell people at this point of the pandemic that you don't bother wearing a mask. It seems like that sends the wrong message.
So I wouldn't interpret it as no mask mandate means don't wear it. I think the difference is this. Yeah, I absolutely, because it's the state taking it away, but the local counties and the businesses And all private places, including churches and other venues, will still, many of them are still going to keep a mask mandate. So for example, if you go into Kroger's, one of their bigger chains, they have stated that they want people to have the mask. Their signage represents that until all their workers are vaccinated. So the vaccinated status makes a difference to people. And it does make a difference in terms of what the risk of transmission is. And again, you know, Texas has its own data. They may have their own pressures, but I would personally recommend people, particularly if they're not vaccinated or they live with people who are vulnerable and not vaccinated, to not be complacent. And the other two tools, in addition to mask wearing, of course, is hand washing, which we don't talk enough about because that's really what keeps the contact surface to getting into your epithelium in your nose or mouth. But also, of course, social distancing. There's nothing better than that, meaning people still have the choice to not go to an event. They have the choice to not engage. They can still online order, etc. And I think the folks who are aware, and when we are a much better educated society on pandemics and infectious disease, that, you know, we are well informed, but I would not take it as the mask mandate. I mean, this is my own interpretation.
Okay.
That it is not to wear a mask. It means that the government, the state government.
That's exactly what it sounded like when the governor of Texas said it. But you know, I guess people hear things in different ways. In any case, how about this? I mean, on the other side of the spectrum, you have Governor Newsom, who obviously the mask mandate is still in place here in California, and he's encouraging people to wear masks. And now he's doubling down, if you'll pardon the pun, but he's actually encouraging people at this point to wear two masks, as we've talked about before. Do you think that, you know, what are the scenarios where you think that would be the most prudent way to go?
I think, again, the people who should take the most caution are the same ones that have the greatest risk of succumbing to the disease, the severe disease, either having the severe disease or actually dying of it. And so I think the double mask, which I have, by the way, seen people certainly in the healthcare environment utilize throughout this, are people who may have more exposure and may have more exposure and more concerned because they have one of the medical conditions that makes them at risk, or they're older and they can have one of those things. So I think that's a very individual thing. And I want people to think about it in terms of themselves. And I also want to tell people not to judge others. There are people who are double masking because they may have some vulnerable medical issue. And so it's not because some people are more worried than others. It's that some people have reason to take more precaution than others. And I'm for that. In California, we know, though, we've had our own logistical issues. We've also been kind of slow to get our teachers vaccinated. We need to reopen our schools. I think that's been a very big issue with mental health. And so I think each state is dealing with its own pressures, its own stakeholders who tend to put a lot of pressure. In Texas, there's a lot of discussion always about civil liberties. In California, it's often the larger union folks, so like the teachers unions, et cetera, wanting to make sure that their folks are taken care of. And if you look at actions, it usually is reflected pretty well by who is influencing the politicians.
Finally, let me ask you about, you know, speaking of people getting the vaccine, the CDC has delayed the release of their guidance on what a lot of people anticipating this, right? What the guidance from the CDC about what people who are fully vaccinated can do, right? There's a lot of kind of, you know, dreams that people have about what they're going to be able to do once they're fully vaccinated. What do you think the guidance is going to look like? Do you think they're going to say that it's okay for people who are fully vaccinated to spend time indoors with others who are fully vaccinated?
Well, there's certainly been calls for people who have been vaccinated to be able to, for example, go to indoor gatherings at a greater capacity, definitely getting vaccine passports for greater travel, because the idea, again, from the clinical trials, from the science that we have seen and we know, and we've been watching over the last 2 to 3 months, is that these vaccines are definitely increasing the immunity, the body's defense against the moderate to severe COVID disease, which is really what is important and what counts. And I think that's going to play a great role. We're also monitoring, of course, the other issue, which is the variants. And I think both have to be watched, because the variants, if it continues, it's really a race against variants. The more vaccinations we get, the less transmission there is, and the less the variants have a role in our future. So it really boils down to no matter what the measures are, no matter what people think our capacity should be for the businesses and stuff, the most important thing is to get vaccinations going as soon as possible. These mass vaccination sites are doing a great job, and not to have vaccine refugees, people who've only had one vaccine dose and then are stuck. I think that's where our real focus has to be. And I do believe that that will play out with us having more abilities to re-engage and re-socialize as we were pre-COVID.
Yeah, it's going to make a big difference. 2 million doses of the vaccine given out in one day. I believe that was yesterday on Thursday. So that's remarkable. Yeah, it certainly is. All right, a lot of progress being made. We'll leave it right there. Dr. Vanila Singh, always great to have you on. Appreciate your time.
Great to be here. Thank you.